Welcome back, everyone, to the Geeks, Geezers, and Googlization Show, the home of Googlization Nation, where we talk with HR and business thought leaders about the crazy shift going on in the world of business, technology, and HR. Here's your host, Ira Wolfe, and co-host, Joyce Gioia.
Hey, welcome back, everyone, Googlization Nation, and welcome back to Geeks Geezers and Googlization, second part of our show today. And we are going to be talking about what Joyce and I have been talking about for years. One is, Joyce, you called it the impending crisis. Almost 20 years ago, too many jobs, too few people.
Wrote a book about it, yes.
I did that. And then the following year, I was talking about it, but then the following year, my book came out. That was 2003 for you, 2004 for me, was The Perfect Labor Storm. Mm-hmm. And guess what? We're living in a perfect labor storm and having an impending crisis 20 years later. So before we dive into it, your newsletter just came out, which is the Herman Trend Alert. Just came out today. For anybody who's interested, I'd suggest going up and subscribing to that, because you talked about taking care of your talent or else. We've been talking about that the last few weeks with a lot of people. Virtual reality, maybe that'll be a way to do it. But in doing some of my research, I've been writing about this. You might have seen it posted on LinkedIn. A lot of reports coming out of how difficult it is, despite the pandemic, despite 6% unemployment rate, and prior to that, higher, how companies are really struggling to fill positions. But I got to read this. So McKinsey, I pulled some of these stats from McKinsey's report. They raised they raised the estimate of how many workers would need to change occupations by 2025 by 28% since the pandemic. And again, we talked about it accelerating that change. On average, companies estimate that 40% of their workers will require reskilling of 6 months or less. So not huge investments. They don't have to go back to college for 4 years and get a degree, but 40% of workers will need to require reskilling. 94% of business leaders report that they expect employees to pick up those new skills, which is a whole other conversation. And then the share of core skills, and this is important. We've been talking about this a long time, about what the life cycle of a skill was, and it keeps crushing down, or the half-life of a skill. The share of core skills that will change in the next 5 years is 40%, and 50% of all employees will need reskilling of some form or fashion. We talked about this 20 years ago.
Yeah, and you know, the Deloitte study even was more shocking, because it said that only 16% of our employees have the skills and abilities that they will need moving into the future, which means that it's going to be full employment for contract trainers and anyone who does training and development, if companies are smart enough to understand the world of hurt that they're heading into. And, you know, the truth is that employers can't operate until everything gets automated, and God knows when that's going to be, without people. We need people to serve our customers and make the products and provide the services. And right now, we have 15 million job openings, and that was a month ago, so it's probably even more. 15 million openings that are not filled, according to ZipRecruiter's latest study. 15 million. Now, when I wrote the book, Impending Crisis, Too Many Jobs, Too Few People, we looked at what the Bureau of Labor Statistics said. And we forecasted out that in the future, by 2010, that we would have a shortfall of 10 million people to fill those positions. This is 15 million. This is like 50% more than that. I mean, that's a lot of openings. And the challenge is why? Why aren't people going back to work? Well, it's childcare, and it's fear of bringing infection home. And it's true that the vaccination movement is going to help if enough people get vaccinated. But it's also the fact that there are a lot of people, Ira, who are just discouraged. They lost their jobs in like the beginning of the year for 2 months or 3 months. They worked really hard to try to find new jobs. And then they became disenchanted with the whole process. And now we need them and we want them back yesterday. And they're saying, well, you know, I've got this stimulus check and I can still get by. And sadly, many of my clients who are frontline, who hire frontline people, who low-skilled people, are saying that people don't want to come back to work because they don't have to. And that's really disturbing to me. So there are some answers, Ira, that you and I can talk about for employers. And one of them, of course, is to make sure that you have the right person in the right job. And that you want to do using assessments, right?
Oh, absolutely. But I'll even go beyond that. And thank you for the plug. But it absolutely is making sure you have it right. But I think there needs to be an assessment of the company as well.
Yes.
You know, I talk. Everybody's heard me talk a lot about candidate experience, and as you said, my top, you know, the titles of my keynote, you know, is either your candidate experience is all effed up, which is FCDD, by the way, which is frustration, confusing, disappointing, and distraction, or duct tape can't fix your effed up, your FCDD'd up experience. But it's true. Companies, let's start with this. Companies want people to come back. Most of them have the same, the PG rated show, crappy candidate applications processes. They're up, again, posting a job description that doesn't tell anything. It doesn't look anything different than anybody else because it's probably been copy and pasted from either their attorney or from the SHRM site. Somebody copy and pasted a job description.
Ouch.
What people want to know is, what's it like to work for the company? Who's my boss going to be? Will I have opportunities to learn? If I come back, what if there's another shutdown? Will I be laid off? How will they treat it? Then you go,
how much flexibility will I have?
Now you go into the parental, you know, what's the parental care? What happens to my kids? What happens if they call off school? It's all these things and policies. Some companies, there are really a lot of, I won't say a lot, there are absolutely some companies that people pull examples from, and there's a lot of good people out there that have rewritten the rules, rewrote the policies, and they go, you know, just as I did. It's like, listen, I'm a small business. We didn't have a lot of rules and policies, but wow, we were doing a lot of activities. I was doing a lot of activities that all of a sudden realized I didn't need to do. And it's not like, oh, I can't wait to go back. And as soon as we go back, we have to reinstate all those rules and regulations. But there are companies that are already doing that. And then there are the other companies that are recognizing that they're rewriting the plan on the fly. They don't know how it's going to work. It's fluid. We're living in this perpetual era of perpetual uncertainty. We're not going back to have a finite physical building, because you've heard, we both talked about this and with the guests, is that it will be hybrid at best. And as hybrid, though, we need to create environments where our employees will feel safe to come back. Right. So, but if they're coming back hybrid, it means they have to feel safe on Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, or Monday, Wednesday, Friday. But then there's other people that may be coming back Tuesday, Wednesday, Friday. So how do you manage? How do you create a culture that is half in and half out? Going back to our virtual reality conversation, that's an opportunity, but it's not quite there. And then it's like, okay, how do we actually do that in a virtual society or a virtual world? And that's being built on the fly. So again, there's so much uncertainty. So yes, are the stimulus checks holding some people back? Sure, but then that goes back to if a stimulus check of $200 or $300 a week is preventing somebody from getting a job, then you really got to think about what the wages are. If that amount of money says, hey, I'm making more money now than I did when I worked, that's a problem.
Amen, brother.
That
sure.
needs to be looked at. So for the companies that are complaining about that, I mean, offer a living wage and people will come back. If they can make more money than they can off a stimulus check. We've heard this story. You and I have been around long enough. We heard the story of welfare, that people didn't work because of the welfare payments. Give me a break. If what they got on a monthly check and food stamps was more than they could get at work, that's the problem. But we have all these other issues. So there's people not only afraid of COVID, but do I really want to go back? I read, and I don't know if I printed it out. There was an article I just read about toxic bosses. And it goes back to, this is really important. I know we're running out of time here too.
Well, people join companies and leave bosses, right?
Yeah, but not enough. There was a study, and it's like it takes 2 years for people with a toxic boss to actually make the job change, which goes back to the Holmes and Ray scale. For those who aren't familiar with it, it measured the levels of stress. It gave points, and a change of a job is a 36. Doesn't mean anything, 0 to 100. But at 37, of stress in your life, had nothing to do with work, but just stress in your life, was the death of a friend. So the death of a friend has the same stress impact as changing a job. And then you throw in frustration, confusion, disappointment, and distraction into, let's make it as difficult as possible for somebody to apply for a job. And then also let's make it difficult when people are there to even find out how many vacation days do I have left. And you have to make an appointment with HR to figure that out. So there's all these things that fill this FCDD up. And then what nobody considers is how stressful it is for people. So even there's people saying, I hate my job, I hate my boss, I hate my employer, I don't want, but it's safe. There's a safety in, I know who my friends are. I know he's a lousy boss, but what if my next boss?
It's the devil, right? It's what people are comfortable with.
Yeah. So there's a whole lot of reasons. I suggest you, we're obviously going to be talking about this for a long time. I suggest you go up to Herman Trend Alert and be able to download and subscribe and get this week's newsletter. To that, there's a whole lot more in there that Joyce had talked about. I'm certainly going to be talking about it for a while. On Friday, we're going to be talking about it at noon with Ed Gordon at the Gordon Report. And the best way to get that link is actually very easy. Go to youtube.com/Ira Wolfe. There it is. Thank you, Roxy. If you go up there, it's actually going to be, it's a big green emblem. And you can subscribe, you can set a reminder for it, or you just put it in your calendar. And Friday at noon Eastern time, by the way, Friday noon Eastern time, we're going to be talking about this month's subject is knowledge shock, and a little bit about this. And Ed's got a whole lot of new stats that he's been working on for there.
Ed always has new stats, right?
Oh, he's got great stats, yeah, and he underestimated them too, but he was right. So you can say that. Thank you again. What was my title? The new title of the show? We're just getting started. But thank you so much for being part of Googlization Nation. Thank you for being listeners of Geeks Geezers Googlization. Thank you for sharing, putting your comments, being active in the chats, being active on LinkedIn. And Twitter. That's where we primarily do our interaction. You can catch the replays, obviously, on YouTube and Facebook, but also on any of your favorite podcasts. And that list keeps growing. So if you just do a search and podcast for Geeks Geezers Googlization, we will show up.
And thank you to Ngomu.
And thank you to Ngomu and Success Performance Solutions for allowing us to be here. So until next week, don't let the shift hit your plans.